All right. Hello. Good morning, everyone, and thanks for joining us today. I'm going to give it just another minute before we get started. All right. Looks like we have a good amount of people here already. So thank you all for joining us. And today we have a webinar on future-proofing menus. For anyone getting to know the Alliance, we are a membership-driven organization. We exist to leverage the power of sports to promote healthy, sustainable communities where we live, work, and play. If you're interested in learning more or becoming a member, you can always shoot me an email at mika@greensportsalliance.org. As I already mentioned, today we are taking a deeper dive into sustainable menu options and plant-based foods. Just a quick Green Sports Alliance update before we start talking about the webinar. And let me just share my screen really quick. We are hosting our summit. If you haven't already heard, the summit will be in Cleveland. And we currently have early bird registration available. So if you want to, go ahead and scan this QR code. We will be in Cleveland May 5 through 7. People are saying Cinco de Mayo in Cleveland, Ohio. So get excited. We are releasing two new playbooks, one on fan engagement and the other on sustainable sports apparel. Lots of opportunities to speak, and etc. So definitely suggest you check that out. Oops. Then otherwise, oh, you still see my screen here? There we go. Otherwise, today we have our thank you to all of our panelists who have joined today throughout this webinar. If you have any questions, please add them to the Q&A box, not to the chat. We'll be sure to answer them throughout the webinar or at the end. I will briefly introduce our panelists and experts at how venues can future-proof menus for sustainability and customer satisfaction, and then I'll pass it over. So I'd like to welcome Scott Jenkins, co-founder of Green Sports Alliance, Steph Lynch, corporate engagement director at Greener by Default, Maggie Baird, founder and president of Support+Feed, Chris Heiting, director of concessions at Kaseya and Levy, and John Woychick III, executive chef at CPKC Stadium, and Levy, who will be joining shortly, just having a bit of tech issues. And with that, I will pass it over to Scott.
Great. Thanks, Mika, and thanks everybody for joining us. And really excited to have this great panel today to talk about a hot topic, which is plant-based foods. I first kind of got tuned into foods about 12 years ago or so when we had a summit in Chicago and we had a social event at Soldier Field. And our staff was pushing the envelope and went with 100% plant-based food at our evening event. And I enjoyed it. And I have to admit, I was like, well, what are we eating here? I wasn't quite sure. And we got some negative feedback from people, and we've come a long ways now. And I had the fortunate experience of hosting Paul McCartney at the Mariners Stadium years ago. And Paul only served plant-based foods for the week of the load-in, the day of the show, and the day and a half load-out. And I thought, well, this is going to be kind of fun. I'm going to see how this goes with all these folks that aren't used to not eating meat. And I tell you, the food was fantastic. And then most recently, with Chef John in Kansas City at CPKC Stadium, we had a symposium a couple of years ago for the Green Sports Alliance, and everything was plant-based, and everybody just thoroughly enjoyed it. The food was delicious. It looked fantastic. It was healthy. And so I've come around a long ways in the 12 years or so since plant-based foods has been on my radar. And it's exciting to see that it's now on the radar of our industry. And thanks to people like Billie Eilish and Maggie and Steph and Chef Chris and John who are leading the charge. We want to have a healthy conversation about why does it matter, why is it important, and how is this good for our business and for our planet. So when we think about people, planet, and profits, food plays a big role in all three. So with that, I'm going to go around the horn here just to make if people can do a quick introduction of themselves in about 1 minute. Chef John is still trying to get in. Hopefully he joins us shortly. But Maggie, why don't we start with you? And then we'll go to Steph and then Chris.
Hi, I'm Maggie Baird. Yeah, I'm the founder of Support+Feed, which is an organization dedicated to addressing our inequitable food system. We address food insecurity, food inequity and the climate crisis by providing nourishing plant-based meals to people experiencing food insecurity, and try to increase people's awareness, increase access and demand for plant-based food to support our addressing of the climate crisis. And I'm also the mother of Billie Eilish and Phineas, and I have been really working for the last many years to try to make the music industry help be more sustainable in all forms, and especially when it comes to food. So we just finished a world tour, which we can talk about in a little bit, but that's who I am.
Good morning, everyone. My name's Steph. I'm the Corporate Engagement Director for Greener by Default. We are a nonprofit that works with institutions like sports venues to implement behavioral science strategies to nudge people to plant-based foods. I came to this work originally helping open restaurants. That was my first career. And then I opened a small food manufacturing kitchen, ran my own catering company, worked in sustainable film production, and then found my way at GPD here. And I'm happy to be here with you guys today.
Chris?
So I'm Chris Heiting. I'm the director of concessions at Kaseya Center in Miami for the Miami Heat. I started with Levy about 12 years ago as a chef on the culinary side, and made the move to front of house after COVID. Now I run the entire concessions department. It's the Green Initiative. Like Miami Heat is very big into the Green Sports Alliance. They've done a lot I think we hosted the summit last year. So this property is very aware of all of the issues that we're talking about today.
Great. Thanks, Chris. And it was a fantastic summit. Enjoyed being at your place for one of our events. Mika, I know Chris is in as a participant. If we can switch him to a speaker, we might be able to introduce him. So let's keep rolling here, and John will join us shortly. Maggie, let's start with you. Can you tell us a little bit about what you're doing with Support and Feed, and what Billy was doing with the tour, and why plant-based foods is such a hot topic?
Well, I mean, plant-based food, has been the great overlooked uh, strategy for addressing climate change for decades. And I don't know if the MIT report has been yet released, but everyone knows what it says, which is that the number two carbon and lack of sustainable cost to an event like a concert or a sporting event is food. Number one being transportation, particularly fan transportation, and then food. And so food is this amazing opportunity that we all have. I'm sure, in the sports world, just like the music world, we have this unique opportunity. We see hundreds of thousands of people all the time. We can make massive change just within our own events, but we also are subject to unique events that other industries are not. I know in the touring world, I've been with Billy when extreme weather events have not only canceled or postponed a show, but been extremely scary and dangerous. And that is something the music and the sports industries face, maybe more than others, especially open air venues. And so we're going to be uniquely affected by the climate crisis. So it is only fitting, I think, that we take this opportunity that we have to address one of the major contributors, which is animal agriculture. So given that, when we started Billy's tour, really from the beginning of the tour, when we book the venues, we look for the most sustainable venues in all forms, and we do have requirements of those venues that, we're going to have no single-use plastics. We're going to allow people to bring their own water bottles, have water stations. On our own touring crew, we eliminate idling of our trucks. We cut down our trucks and buses, et cetera. It's quite vast and long, but a large focus of it is on the plant-based food factor. And so what we backstage is one story. It's really all plant-based backstage, but for the concession factor, we have a requirement that each venue do at least 3 mains for concessions. This is up from 2022 when we did 1 main. We just had a requirement of 1 main. So in other words, no popcorn, no peanut. Those don't count. Those are great, but they don't count. And then this tour, we were able to move that to 3 mains. And I will say that many of the arenas really leaned in very heavily, Kaseya being one of them. Some went fully plant-based for the entire extent of her shows, up to 6 shows. But we had the requirement up to 3. So that's when we're booking the tour. And then what we found in doing that, the venues, signed on and were good about it. But what we discovered is, what you all know, is that we needed to help the venues have a deeper understanding of the hows and the whys, the whys originally, and then the hows. And so actually, before I get to that, because that's going to lead more to Steph, some of the other things that we've been able to do is really amplify the food. And so what Support and Feed's role in this is that we have created plant maps. So we help the audience know in the Know Before You Go that Live Nation sends out, and on the social media of Support and Feed, which we then farm out to all of the Billy fan pages, etc. We have, oh my God, I have a giant dog on me. We have our plant map. So we show the fans where they're going to be able to find the delicious plant-based food in every venue. We make videos to tell them how great it's going to be, encourage them to eat food when they're there. And that has made a huge difference. We also organize in many cities plant-based food drives, really to emphasize the community give back of the tour and the fact that fans can be involved in supporting their local community, and also really just help people understand why plant-based food and what plant-based food is. Because surprisingly, sometimes people are like, oh, I didn't even think about the fact that, a bag of lentils is a plant-based food. And so that's a way for us to give back to community and also involve the fans. And then what we really learned, which was, I think, the groundbreaking one this time, is really it had been in the hands of our Live Nation rep and to some degree the booking agent and Reverb, who you all probably know. To Reverb would really talk to the venues about the food, etc. Then we realized that if we could give sort of culinary trainings and help the staff have a much better understanding of the whys of doing it and then the hows, that could even be more effective. So that's when we partnered Support and Feed with Greener by Default and of course Billy's team, Live Nation and Reverb, to offer the culinary trainings, which we did this fall. And so that was all the venues in the United States had a session with us talking about this, which I think, Steph, you will talk more in depth about. And then that is now including follow-up calls and reaching out to other venues along the way. So I think that really made a big difference in the success of it. Some venues had kind of done that themselves. Like I could name several, the O2 Arena, the Manchester Arena. They had really, really done a lot of this themselves. But for the ones in the United States, which by the way, this was kind of a secondary market. And so it sort of was maybe even more important because it sometimes was venues we hadn't visited before. So we needed to be extra careful. So that's kind of what we have done and seen a lot of success with this year.
And Scott, I can just build on that. Yeah, thank you, Micah. Just going over some high level outcomes and successes from that tour and the work that we did with Support and Feed. We wanted to specifically mention the sales of plant-based items that for all the venues, it either matched or exceeded the forecasted sales from that. We do see that in a couple of the venues, they exceeded the sales dramatically. So there are a couple of venues that doubled the amount of plant-based sales that they made. And then Moody Arena, I want to give a shout out to because they 4 times the amount of plant-based items that were normally sold at a venue like this, which is just amazing to hear. So another couple of highlights I wanted to mention are that a lot of venues are keeping plant-based options on their menu year-round. So especially the venues where we came in at the right time for R&D for next season's menu, we saw that was very easy for them to just continue to do that work year-round. And then we're still collecting a lot of the emissions-based data, but wanted to highlight here a stat from Manchester Co-op. They saw 47% lower emissions from going 100% plant-based in their venue. So that's a really awesome outcome. And we're excited to share out more of the case studies as they become available. And finally, one of the feedback that we got that I think is really worth highlighting is that there was really strong support from staff and from the vendors, the third-party vendors or the partnerships that concessions teams worked with. One venue said it like, we're used to just dropping fries and chicken tenders every day in the fryers and over and over and over again. So it was really fun and exciting for our culinary teams to step up and do something more interesting and exciting and creative. So we saw a lot of really great buy-in from staff in that way. And I will drop into the chat a bunch of case studies that our friends at Gold pulled together for a deeper dive. And we're hoping to have more information coming out soon about that. Next slide, Micah. So wanted to just share a little bit about the fan response, because a large point of reluctance that I think we see with culinary teams is that people won't want to eat the plant-based foods, right? So we did diner satisfaction surveys and collected data from each of the venues. And on any of the questions that we asked about the food experience, they rated a 4.5 out of 5 or higher for diner satisfaction. There was no meaningful guest resistance that was reported from any of the venues. I think one venue mentioned that some of the dads of Billy fans came into a suite and were a little reluctant to eat the plant-based options and buy the suite ticket. And the culinary team was really great. They worked with them and gave them some tastings of the food, and they were blown away and ended up enjoying the food dramatically and came in and had a great time at the suite. So really love that story and really awesome point that the culinary team collaboration really is an important piece of the success of this model. Then I have one more slide for you all, just highlighting some of the really delicious menu options that were available. The culinary teams at all 11 of the venues went really above and beyond in developing really delicious flavors to provide for all of the fans. And I wanted to highlight 4 that we really loved here. So the Bang Bang Tofu Bowl from Kaseya, which Chef Chris will talk about in a little bit. The Pickle Oyster Mushroom Nigiri from Kia, a jackfruit, it was a barbecue jackfruit from Smoothie King Center, and then a plant-based beef and mushroom pizza at Moody in Austin. And I will also drop into the chat a full list of venue food that was provided across the country, just to kind of get everyone's brain going and help with creativity and ideation. With some really awesome options on the menus. So excited to highlight a couple here. And I think that was the full recap, Scott.
Great. Thanks, Steph. And I got to put a plug in for your training sessions that you did. I get a chance to sit in on one. And boy, what some fantastic advice you have. I wish we had time to go through it here with everybody, but I would encourage you to keep your eyes open for that. And if you get a chance, plug into that, Stefanie. And maybe that's something we do just as an extra webinar for people who are really interested, so we can just dive into it deeply. Because after I heard that, I'm like, we have to have a webinar on this topic. Yeah. So glad we could pull that together today. And Chef John made it. Thanks for joining us. Sorry for the technical difficulties. Why don't you do a short intro, John, of who you are, and then why don't you tell us a little bit about your journey on plant-based foods at CPKC Stadium?
Sure. I'm John Woychick. I'm at CPKC Stadium. It's the only purpose-built stadium on the planet for a women's professional sports team, the KC Current. So we are one of a kind. We are a fully sustainable building. We do a lot of special diet throughout all of our menus. And this year we started a good initiative of plant-based, plant-forward items in our concession stands. And then we sample some stuff out in suites. I've been with Levy for just under 2 years, and this has been an awesome change in career. I didn't know this side of it, where going with sustainability and plant-based and special diets, and it's really expanded my my knowledge of my business, and I'm really excited to be a part of this panel.
John, tell us about, I mentioned before you got on the call when we had our symposium a year or 2 years ago at the stadium, and I was just blown away by how good the food was, and it was 100% plant-based, and we were fairly new into the first year of the building, and you really blew me away by what you did and what you offered us. Tell us what that was like creating that, and what did you do differently?
Yeah, thanks. Well, as always, it's all made with love. The key is really like just understanding new fats and I started really diving into newer flavors I didn't experience before, like, with a lot of vegetarian or plant-based diets, you get into Mediterranean or like Indian food, and I didn't really experience a lot of that before. So we got to use a lot of new flavors, and that encouraged my staff. Like you were talking, Maggie and Steph were talking about how the culinary teams got involved. My entire staff, when I introduce something new, like it is like Christmas Day. Like they want to do all these new spices and they want to try this, and then it blows their mind that something that is just made out of plants, as they usually put it, can taste that good. And I'm just so lucky that I have a partner, my owner of my team, that wants to push for this sort of thing all the time.
And John, that is one of the keys to this. I mean, to give you the latitude, like what's going to nudge us off of business as usual. And sometimes it's somebody like Billie Eilish that says, "Hey, I want to do this," and people say, "Of course, we'll do it." And then sometimes it's ownership that says, "Hey, we want to be catering to different culinary, requirements and tastes." In your case, getting that decision maker to say, "Yeah, we want to do this," gives you an open field to play on.
Yeah, it's been great. And we have a lot of guests, especially our opening day last year. We had children and parents, like guests coming up to us in tears saying that they have gone to all these arenas and stadiums their entire lives, and to come to a building where they feel like they're finally being seen and heard. Like we had so many, every time we have an event, we have so many happy guests because they feel like people are finally getting it and they're helping them out. So it's been great.
Chris, tell us about your experience at Kaseya.
Well, I mean, we're here in Miami, so we have not only just a varied a variety of people that live here, a variety of cultures that are here, but there's also, the fitness mentality that's very heavy here. So we've had requests throughout the years for, plant-based meals and more healthier options. And it's something that has slowly kind of expanded, but this past year, just due to the amount of people requests and just the changing shift in how people see food, we hit hard on the subcontractors and on our own chefs to make sure that there was an available option at all locations. In the past, we've had our fit cart area, which is kind of our one healthy spot in the entire arena, where people could come if they wanted a salad or something, but it was kind of basic and it really wasn't, anything special. But this year we completely revamped the cart thanks to the Billie Eilish requirements and all the stuff that we did with the training with Steph and everything. We came up with a whole slew of new items for that cart. We actually expanded the cart into two carts because there were so many things we wanted to serve on there. And then we challenged all of our subcontractors, which we have 8 subcontractors here in the arena, to have a plant-based forward or a plant forward or plant-based item on their menu so that a guest doesn't have to go to one specific place, but they could go to any location and find something that they can eat there. But then, of course, we have the new and improved Fit Cart, which is, just it's awesome. The menu is awesome, the variety is awesome, and it's not like anything I've seen in an arena before.
Great. We talked about, who's got the power to make decisions and set the agenda, but there's one thing that I think everybody in the sports industry cares about, and that's money, making money. And I think sometimes we tend to miss opportunities that are out there in the marketplace. And from the comments I'm hearing, there's a lot of demand out there for this that I don't think people realize. And the sports industry too, traditionally almost everybody was hardcore sports fans, and the younger crowd especially tend to be less apt to be hardcore sports fans. And if we don't relate to them around the environment and the planet, if our brand doesn't speak to them, if we don't offer them the kind of things that they want and expect, I think we're missing an opportunity there to grow our fan base. And obviously, the demographic at the concerts are fairly narrow, but sports plays to a very wide demographic. And I think it's going to help us to offer these kinds of things. John, like you said in the comments you're getting from people at CPKC Stadium, it's not off-putting to the average fan, but it opens the door to a whole lot of other people to engage and do good business. So and maybe Chris and John, do you see this as a growth revenue potential to do these things? I know you can talk about, I mean, it's certainly fun to talk about it, but if we can get people in the door and get them to come more often and tell their friends and their neighbors about what we're doing, we're helping our brand and ultimately helping our sales.
Well, yeah, I
Yeah,
would say, I mean,
go
if
ahead,
there's
Chris.
there, Yeah, if
Oh,
there's a percentage of people that come into your arena, and they, that percentage wants healthier and that percentage keeps getting bigger every year, then yeah, you're losing sales every year by not having something that people are asking for. So, seeing an expanding market, if you don't expand your choices that they can choose from, then you're really just shooting yourself in the foot when it comes to revenue.
Well, can I add that also depending on how you're preparing that food, there's cost savings just in the food itself. And to be honest, sometimes there is Steph, I know you have case studies of actual showing of how much people can save in the concessions, et cetera. I think sometimes there's a lot of misunderstandings about plant-based food and cost, and those are based on just certain products and certain availabilities. But when it comes to actual whole food ingredients for products, those tend to be less expensive. So there's really cost savings just baked into that.
Yeah, I'll add to that. Just right. We haven't met price parity in our supply chain for plant-based meat analogs yet, but when we look at things like rice and beans, that's the cheapest thing there is out there, right? And so how do we get back to that whole grain mentality of creating great foods that save money as well? And then, yeah, Maggie mentioned we have a couple of case studies. So GBD got our start working with hospitals, and the first hospital we worked with was the New York City Health and Hospital System. They implemented some of our strategies, and they're saving 59 cents per plate now. And then Kaiser Permanente, we worked with in California, and they're saving 18% on their food costs by focusing on whole grain plant-based foods. So there are tremendous possibilities out there. And I also especially want to mention this going into the next year, right? Beef prices are the highest we've ever seen. We're expecting the avian flu to be even worse next year than it was this year. So egg prices are going to fluctuate and skyrocket. So if we can find replacements for those things that are going to cost us money and we know are going to cost us money next year, let's do it. And replacing eggs and baked goods is a no-brainer. So I can save you a lot of money right there next year.
That's for sure. We have a couple of interesting things that happen. One of the venues had a pretzel on the product line that venue decided to go fully plant-based for the show, but that pretzel had milk powder in it. And so they worked with the manufacturer to test it without the milk powder. They literally just took it out and saw no change in the product at all. So that was kind of an instant gratification event. I also wanted to mention when we talk about health, I think right now that we've all been in the middle of a massive disinformation campaign for the last few years, and that has unfortunately affected the plant-based food industry and the promotion of plant-based food. And, there's been a lot of very calculated disinformation put out there and, sponsored by animal agriculture industry. I think, and we've all seen the massive campaigns around protein for the last year. And of course, you can get adequate protein on a plant-based diet. But I think what's really important to note is that what the medical profession and science is really showing is that our population is extremely lacking in fiber. And it's not protein. People aren't dying of protein deficiencies, but they are dying from lack of fiber. And we have massive increases of things like colon cancer, et cetera. And the reason I bring that up is because fortunately, that is starting to infiltrate our media and really be something people are talking about. And the prediction is that that will be the new story. It is the real scientific story, and it will actually be. And so when we're dealing with our fan bases, yes, we have been kind of up against a lot of disinformation and this very heavy focus on animal protein, especially, but that is changing. So I think getting ahead of that and knowing that fiber really is having its day can also help in our planning of our meals and how people are going to perceive them.
In our prep calls, someone was talking about sweets and the sweet menus, and a lot of times it's just kind of a robotic reorder. Somebody in some administrative roles ordering food for whoever's going to occupy the suite, and it's a great place to play around with menus. And I think there's some experience we've had somewhere on this call about that and how successful that's been. So I'll throw that out to the group and see who wants to respond.
Well, I can say here at CPKC that we, in our suites and premium areas, we have a brand new menu every single match. So I try to introduce a all dietary needs in that sweet menu. So you have 4 set items, then you have choices of what you can get. And then there's always plant forward items. We have like 2 or 3 plant-based or vegan items that are in our entrees, our apps, and like our cold and hot starters. So this is a chance. This is what we were talking about in our prep call. It's kind of like a testing ground. So, if somebody chooses that, or if I put the plant-based item in the top group where every group gets it, we get instant feedback on if that was good and if it's something that we should try to sell out on the concourse or in our other spaces where more money is exchanging hands. But yeah, it's been a great test, and I know Maggie, you really want to get in the premium side. And hey, if you ever want to come visit here, we got plenty of space to do some fun stuff.
I'd love
And
to.
another thing that we were talking about was the like a crawl, walk, run when it comes to the plant-based stuff. Like when we started here with our cauliflower tikka masala, we offer, it's like 6 ounces of cauliflower, and then it was like 3 ounces of chicken, but nobody wanted the chicken. So we finally just omitted that. And now we found that people just want the cauliflower. So we're starting to, next season, we're going to expand these options out of our one hot market where we offer 3 plant-based items, and we're going to extend them to other spaces in the building because we've seen that it's growing and people really want it.
And we may need to come back for another symposium on food to Kansas City.
Come on, baby. We're ready for you.
Well, I mean, what I love about what you're doing, the sweets, is that we did find that the sweets and the regular concessions often in arenas are very, very different, and they seem to have different levels of enthusiasm and ability to change and willingness to change. But some of them like what you're doing kind of lead the way and have maybe the most adventurous, but then others seem to be very stuck in like, this is what our clientele expects and this is what they have. And again, I think a lot of that time is just habitual ordering. I don't think it's necessarily coming from the clients. I think it's habitual. And even then, the idea of how you could introduce things more gradually and have more options, maybe still have the regular options that they're used to, but have more regular ones. But I'd really like to see the sweets really take on this challenge, partly because, as we all know, the sweets tend to be a place where maybe there's a little bit more potential for waste. And so when you're going to have extra food or potential waste, the climate impact of what you're serving is even more important. So would love to see the arenas and the venues where the suites are really taking the lead on this.
I'm going to ask the audience to start putting questions in the chat. So as we get near the end here, we want to leave some time for Q&A. So if you all want to start doing that, that'd be helpful. But I want to go back to Steph and have you talk about strategies in menu placements and talking about these items and defaulting to the plant-based solution, because I thought what I learned in the session you did was really interesting and helpful. And I think for people who are in the food and beverage side of the business, there's some really valuable advice there.
Yeah. And I also want to pick up on Chef John's mention of a balanced protein product there, because I think that market is growing rapidly and is a really awesome and easy solution for sports venues. So I'll start there and then I'll go back to defaults real quick. But yeah, so for anyone who doesn't know, a balanced protein, and I feel like I should be paid by this category one day because I'm its biggest spokesperson, but it essentially means replacing 30 to 70% of a meat-based ingredient with a plant-based alternative. So the place that this works the easiest is with a balanced burger. So taking out 30 to 70% of the beef and replacing it with something like mushrooms is the most common thing. We saw this at Billy's Tour. Xfinity Center in Philly made a black and white cheesesteak, and they replaced half of the beef with roasted umami mushroom flavor, basically. And they're keeping it on the menu. So, and that's in Philly, doing a cheesesteak. So it can be done in a variety of options like this cauliflower chicken. Was it a taco or a bowl, Chef John? Oh, you're on mute. Sorry to put you on the spot.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
All right. It's a roasted cauliflower tikka masala. It's served with like a coconut jasmine rice.
Nice. Yeah. So that's like a very easy opportunity to reduce the amount of animal products that you're putting into a product and increase the amount of plant-based options. So we've done some calculations on this. If a stadium with 18,000 seats swapped out their burger for a balanced burger, so replaced it with half mushrooms and made their own proprietary patty, it would offset about 1.8 million miles of driving in a gas-powered vehicle. So you would save the carbon emissions equivalent of that, which is dramatic for one recipe change, basically. And I highlight this because I think it's further a no-brainer because this category often performs better in taste tests than a 100% beef burger would. So there are some companies out there who are doing this, and they can work with sponsors or they can work with partnerships that you have, but also you can just do it in-house by creating your own recipe. And we're seeing really great success. So if there's one strategy I can impart on everyone today, it's that one that I want you to take away. And then I can briefly touch, Scott, on defaults. So the organization that I work for, the nonprofit I work for, is called Greener by Default. And the default piece is about changing the mentality around how we approach menuing. So right now we live in a pretty predominantly meat default, so a meat-centric world, right? And when we think about defaults, I want you to think about like your email inbox settings or your phone settings, right? Those are things that are set up by default for you to operate in. So you have to go out of your way to change the default settings of something. So when we treat food in a similar way, we default to having a plant-based food instead of a meat-based food. Science shows people are 7 times more likely to stick with the plant-based option. So you could do that in your menus. I know Chef Chris did it at Kaseya. They're doing it at the Fit Cart now. So everything is a default plant-based offering that then you can add meat or dairy to if you want that. And it dramatically increases how many people will just stick with the plant-based option.
Great. And I have to correct myself on the chat. You're not going to be able to get into there, but there's a Q&A box. So if you have a question, a couple of you have found it. So go to the Q&A box, click there and put your questions in. So we have a few here. So let's get started here. I work at a venue that already has a plethora of plant-based options. How can we improve accessibility for our fans to get to those items and make sure we're maximizing profits on plant-based food and beverage options?
I just want to say, Steph, I think that I want to say about the balance burger that is an amazing climate solution. It's not a customer. It's not appeasing customers who may want the other option solution. So I think it really requires both. And I think when we're talking about what this question is right now, I think the most important thing we've talked about is the menu placement and the labeling and the naming of the products, which I think is where we've had the biggest success this year. If you can talk about that stuff with your strategies, that would be great.
Sure. Yeah. So essentially, we're looking at strategies that get 70% of the population who identifies as flexitarian to eat more plant-based options. So in line with Alex's question here, and 2 easy strategies that we recommend is not calling something vegan or vegetarian, right? When you say it's a vegan burger, that puts people in the mentality of, do I identify as a vegan instead of, do I want to eat this product? And the way I like to my favorite example of this is like if you saw a celiac bowl on a menu and you don't have celiac disease or you're not gluten-free, you're probably not going to order the celiac bowl. The same is true for plant-based foods for vegan and vegetarian. So instead call it something like a spicy Thai peanut noodle bowl. And that sounds delicious, gets people to want to eat it. So there's the naming convention of it. And then secondly, the menu engineering piece. So 2 strategies that you can do around that is by making something a special. So chef special or most popular tend to be the 2 phrases that work best to drive people towards purchasing a product because they trust chefs and we're herd animals. We want to do what everyone else is doing. So chef special, most popular. And then also putting the plant-based item first on a menu in each category. That's the #1 slot that people will order from.
And then I think also the storytelling feature, which I know that some of the arenas, in addition to what we put out on socials with the plant maps, there were screens at many venues really highlighting the plant-based food and really just making kind of fan fun. And again, like in our case, there were a lot of venues that took advantage of naming things after Billy's songs or Billy's burrito and any of that can be sports team related, et cetera. I feel like that was a big seller.
Yeah.
I might add to, in an arena setting or in a sports setting, there's usually a media department, and they do things all the time for, to advertise things that are in the stadium. So if your venue has a lot of plant-based, but their message isn't out, you could partner with the media department. There's a bunch of holidays throughout the year that you could leverage, that would be like maybe it's National Potato Day or, something like that. Or, you could just pick a day that is going to be that arena's plant-based day, or where they celebrate something like that. Because arenas are always looking for something to bring guests in. So that's something that maybe they haven't thought of. Maybe that could be a day that sells tickets for your arena, but then also brings, notice to the vegetarian and vegan items that you have in all of your locations.
Also, I would add that having things really readily available is important. I think back to the days when you went to Dodger Stadium, like to get a plant-based Dodger dog, you had to go to one, you walk over the entire stadium to find the one place, and when it's really everywhere, I think a lot more people buy.
Yeah, it makes it the normalized thing too, right? Like, everyone's eating it, and so you don't have to go look for the one vegetarian thing in the whole arena. Yeah.
We've got an interesting question here from our good friend Dave Newport about men and maybe the stereotype that they think they need to eat meat to be strong. And, if anybody's seen the Game Changers movie, that might change your mind about that with some great stories about athletes. But is that a hurdle we have to overcome with fans that we're trying to introduce them to plant-based foods?
I think it is a hurdle. I think it goes back to also the question about, disinformation, misinformation, indoctrination. There is a lot to overcome. There are a lot of plant-based athletes. And of course, most of your fans in the audience are not necessarily athletes themselves. And so a lot of those people are coming just to, have the special treat that they get when they go to a stadium. So I think there's a lot of misconceptions that we have to overcome. That's why I'm like talking a lot about like the fiber, which is now going to be really in our mindset and being able to focus on. And of course, we know that plant-based proteins are not only adequate, but in many cases superior and often and also contain fiber as well. So I think we could do a better job at promoting that story. I don't know how much the brain science Stephanie says in the arena about how much that's playing into what people are ordering.
And the reality is there's a very small percentage of the population that are carnivores, that are solely not eating anything plant-based. So I think expanding again outside of this identity matrix and instead into that sounds delicious and I want to eat it really can appeal to all populations.
Yeah,
I mean, we did occasionally have on one of our culinary trainings, occasionally we did have someone who would say, I don't eat any plant-based food to a chef perhaps might say that. And we'd say, well, wait, like not even an apple, And, again, that is an extremely rare and it is broadening people's mind to say like when people picture plant-based food, a lot of times what they're really just picturing is a meat analog, right? That's all they're picturing. And you're like, well, actually most of the food on the planet is plant-based food, every grain, every seed, every nut, every fruit, every vegetable, and all the products you can make from that. So we do really have to like break through this very narrow picture of what people think of when they hear the words.
and they taste great and they're healthier for you, and less carbon intensive. We have another question here. What other private sector settings besides venues and arenas would you recommend expanding these initiatives to?
I could start with that.
Well, I can go.
Yeah, go
I'm
for it.
sorry. I would go just because of who I work for with Levy Restaurants. Our parent company is Compass Group. We're the world's largest food provider. We're in 190 countries, and we do everything from sports entertainment to school for K through 12, colleges. We do corporate dining. We do prisons. We do nursing homes, hospitals. Pretty much every type of food service aspect that you can find. So like and any one of those that works, a more plant-based forward and a more cost-centric menu works very well in pretty much every type of private setting that you can think of.
And of course, it's really the foundation of why Support and Feed exists, because when we stepped into the world of food insecurity, we were shocked to find, that organizations that are feeding huge numbers of people and very important that we do so, but are not also taking into account the climate impact of that food or the health impact of that food. So I think that the food insecurity world of supporting people with food really can, I mean, that's our mission, but we'd love to see that really across the board. That opportunity is literally there, from whether you're scheduling a business lunch, a dinner party, to a massive convention center. I think it should always be on your mind.
And I think that's the exciting thing about what we do in the sports entertainment industry is the cultural and market influence that we have. I mean, I think we punch our weight really in how we can expose that to the average person,
Yeah, I
and
mean, I
make
think
it a fun thing.
I think in some ways the music industry, the sports industry kind of take an unfair hit in a way. There's a lot of focus, but they're not more they're not worse contributors than almost any other corporation. But again, like I led with, we have the most unique opportunity. And because we're fan facing, not only can we change what we're doing, but we can tell stories about it, which can really change culture. And that's really unique and a real gift.
Yeah, it is. And we have another question that kind of touches on that a little bit. When you think about influencers in our societies, government plays a role, right? So how could city governments best support these initiatives in private sector settings? And I think the fact that we lead by example gets people thinking about it, and it makes my mind start to go down the health and food security side of things, which certainly government plays a role in. So I'm curious if anybody has some thoughts on that.
Yeah, we work with a handful of government institutions, and especially with uh, I'm forgetting the acronym now, visitor bureau management groups too. So like there's a lot of crossover between, for example, I live in LA, right? LA runs the contracts for LAX, for the LA Zoo, for the LA Convention Center, right? Like all these different institutions that are very deeply entwined with government. So I think there's real possibility there for governments to take a larger stance on this and be able to actually influence the food policy at these larger institutions. And we're working actively on some of that work right now. And then I do want to highlight really quick, we were partnership with the New York City Office of Food Policy. They introduced something called the Plant Powered Carbon Challenge, and we were their implementation partner. The initiative just ended, but it was a really awesome success of challenging private institutions to step up and reduce their carbon emissions by 25% through plant-powered foods. So through that partnership, we worked with a lot of different institutions in New York City to implement a lot of these strategies. And I think to the previous question, everybody eats, right? And the scary stat that I unfortunately like to share a lot is if we went carbon neutral in every other industry, but continued to eat as we are right now, we will still surpass the 1.5 degrees Celsius of global warming that we need to remain under. So we have to do something about food. And it's not, I think sports and music give us a great opportunity because they are staffs who are used to changing things all the time. They're flexible, they're creative, they're really ambitious people. So that's been a really awesome success point for us, but it needs to be everyone doing something, everyone changing some of their habits to get this under control.
And to put the food back in context of the overall carbon emissions associated with our sports and entertainment industry, travel is by far the lion's share of it. And then food is definitely the second place contributor to carbon emissions associated with our industry. And that's something, Steph, that I didn't know until, 3, 4 months ago we were chatting.
Yeah.
And boy, we need to get the word out on that and that's something we can change. It's really hard to change the way people travel and the infrastructure we have. We can influence it and encourage people to do things. But we can control what we serve in our venues. And if that can have an impact outside of our venues into our communities, we can play an important role there.
Exactly.
Sachi has a question here. What types of plant-based menu items tend to perform best in terms of sales in sports venues? Any product attributes, texture, flavor, branding, sampling that influence the success of the item to stay on the menu?
I would say in my case, it's the newer stuff that people haven't seen. So like I was saying, the tikka masala, it's new flavors. A lot of people are scared of plant-based burgers, hot dogs, just because of the evolution of them. And if they tried them 10 years ago, they're not going to try it, in my opinion. So I think it's really elevating and kind of like cutting edge, showing that you can do plant-based with everyday food items. But yeah, you definitely have to kind of be creative. I feel, at least on our end, and it's a lot of garnish and a lot of bright colors. I think is very attractive. But yeah, I find that we get a lot of people asking for that stuff more than like a vegan hot dog or a black bean burger. They want to see more extensive stuff.
Mm-hmm. All right, we're quickly running out of time here. So why don't we go around the horn with just closing thoughts or comments you have, any advice you might offer? And Chris, let's start with you.
Well, I would say for those that are planning their menus or that are in planning sessions, that the most beneficial thing for me with this whole process was, as Stefanie said, she hit us on R&D. We were still in the middle of making our menus for the year, and the amount of effort and brainstorming and people involved in kind of coming up with these menus was massive. But it was something that saved us a lot of time on the back end because we were able to transfer a lot of this stuff into premium areas and into the concourse. So I didn't really have to think about that whole part of it once we started getting into the other part of planning. So like all of that was checked off, and not only checked off, but we had things that, were far above what we would have probably come up with on our own, because it would have been in planning with everything else and maybe had been jumbled up. But since there was such a focus on plant-based at this time, it was to use the word that was usually a plethora of ideas that we had, and then we were able to execute.
Great. John, closing thoughts.
Well, one thing I want to mention is Chris said that our parent company, Levy's parent company, is Compass Group. They have committed to a net zero emissions by 2050. So we're every day moving towards that. But again, it's the largest food service company on the planet, so they're pushing for this. I think more people see that these larger corporations see how important this is, that we're gonna have a lot more people join in.
Awesome. Steph.
I would say it's okay to start slow, but do something. And it's a company value we have to meet people where they're at. It's how we've positioned this work as we give a checklist and work with the operations and work with the culinary team to decide what will work best given their environment. But there's always something that people can do. So I would encourage and challenge people to take the leap and make something happen.
Great. And thanks for all the great work you're doing and the education you're sharing with our industry. Maggie.
I would just say this is a win-win, and it doesn't have to come from an artist. It can come from literally anyone in the industry at each individual venue. It is a win all around. There's no, as Steph said, you can start slow, but everything you add that is delicious and appealing, that your chefs love making, that saves your venue money, and that your fans love, is just a win. And then happens to be a win for the planet at the same time. There's really no downside to doing this.
Well, thank you, Maggie, for what you do, and for Billy and in the entertainment industry for leaning into this and pointing us in the right direction. Any last thoughts here with the group? And Mika, I don't know if you have anything you want to close out with.
Can I just quickly say, if there are venues who are interested in doing the workshop with Support and Feed and Greener by Default, I'll drop or maybe Mika can drop my email into the chat, but please get in touch. We're doing these trainings through next year free of cost for any venue that's interested. So
I'd highly recommend it. It was very, very informative. Mika, close us out.
Cool. Nothing else on my end. This has made me hungry, so I think I'm gonna go get a snack. But appreciate you all today. Great conversation. Thanks for everyone asking questions in the chat as well. If you have questions, want follow-up connections, anything like that for the listeners, shoot me an email. I put Steph's email in the chat as well. But yeah, really thanks to all the panelists. You guys are awesome.
I have one more thing to say, which I forgot to say, because we did find that some venues found that the community give back sort of portion of it was really, really valuable. So regardless of what any venues are doing, if you'd like to organize plant-based food drives for any events, maybe Earth Day or anything you're doing, please reach out to me, Maggie at supportandfeed.org, and we can help support that. I think that's a great way to bring community in, and we're always looking for ways to support the communities around these venues. So thank you.
Great. And I hope we can pick this conversation up in person when we're in Cleveland, Ohio on Cinco de Mayo. So we can see you there. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for being here.
Thank you.
Everyone have a great day.